The sapphire necklace caught the morning light streaming through our kitchen window, casting tiny blue reflections across the coffee-stained table. Iris held it up like a trophy, admiring the way the stones sparkled against her pale fingers. "It's beautiful," she said, fastening it around her neck with practiced ease. "My sister really outdid herself this time." I looked up from my scrambled eggs, fork halfway to my mouth. "Since when does Rebecca buy you jewelry? Last Christmas she gave you a gift card to Target." Iris laughed, that musical sound that used to make my heart skip but now felt rehearsed. "People change, Kellan. Maybe she's finally growing up." The necklace was elegant, expensive-looking. 3 sapphires set in white gold, with smaller diamonds flanking each stone. It had to cost at least $2,000, maybe more. Rebecca worked at a grocery store in Portland and had 3 kids. The math didn't add up. "Must have been some bonus," I muttered, returning to my breakfast. "Don't be such a cynic." Iris adjusted the necklace in the hallway mirror, tilting her head to catch the light. "Not everything has to be suspicious." But that was the thing about being a mechanic for 20 years. You learn to spot when something doesn't fit. A wobble in a wheel, a knock in an engine, a wife wearing jewelry worth more than our monthly mortgage payment. My gut told me something was off, even if I couldn't prove it yet. The rest of the morning passed normally. Iris left for her law office downtown, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like coffee and lies. I headed to Brooks Auto Repair, the shop I'd inherited from my father. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings usually calmed me, but today I couldn't shake the image of those sapphires glinting around my wife's neck. Around lunch, I was elbow deep in a transmission rebuild when my phone buzzed. Instagram notification. I rarely used social media, but Chloe had insisted I follow her friends so I could stay connected with her world. 17-year-old logic. The notification was from Ethan Turner's account. I knew Ethan peripherally. He sold real estate around town, drove a leased Tesla, and had the kind of artificially white teeth that screamed insecurity. He'd started showing up at town events recently, always hovering near the younger wives, including mine. I almost ignored the notification, but something made me click it. The photo loaded slowly on my ancient phone, revealing Ethan's living room. Expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. And there, laid out on his coffee table like a museum piece, was the exact same necklace my wife was wearing. The caption read, "For someone special." My hands went numb. I stared at the screen, willing the image to change, to be different somehow. But there it was, the same 3 sapphires, the same white gold setting, the same diamond accents. Even the chain was identical, with that distinctive twist pattern I'd memorized from watching Iris fasten it that morning. I screenshotted the post, my thumb shaking as I saved the image. Then I texted it to Iris with a simple message. Interesting coincidence. Her reply came back within minutes. "It's just a joke between friends. Don't be so insecure." Insecure. The word hit like a slap. After 15 years of marriage, she was calling me insecure for questioning why another man was posting photos of jewelry identical to what she claimed was a gift from her sister. I called Rebecca. "Hey, Kellan," she answered on the 3rd ring, sounding harried. "What's up?" "Thanks for the necklace you got, Iris. She loves it." Silence stretched across the line. In the background, I could hear her kids arguing over something. "What necklace?" Rebecca finally asked. "The sapphire one. She said you gave it to her." "Kellan, I haven't bought Iris anything since her birthday 6 months ago, and that was a scented candle from the dollar store. I can barely afford groceries right now." The transmission parts scattered across my workbench suddenly seemed very far away. "Are you sure? Maybe you forgot." "I think I'd remember spending $2,000 on jewelry," Rebecca said, her voice sharp. "What's going on?" "Nothing. Just thanks anyway." I hung up before she could ask more questions. My workshop felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in as the implications settled over me like a heavy blanket. Iris had lied. Not just a white lie or an omission, but a deliberate, calculated deception. And Ethan Turner had the same necklace. That evening, I waited for Iris to bring up the text I'd sent. She didn't. She moved through our house like nothing had happened, humming while she cooked dinner, asking about my day with the same practiced interest she'd shown for years. The necklace was gone. She'd taken it off somewhere between the office and home. "How was Rebecca when you talked to her today?" I asked over dinner, testing the waters. Iris looked up from her salad, fork paused midway to her mouth. "I didn't talk to Rebecca today. Why?" "Just wondering how she's doing. With the kids and everything. She's fine, I'm sure." Iris returned to her salad, but I caught the slight tension in her shoulders. Why the sudden interest in my sister? No reason. Just thought I'd call and thank her for the necklace. Now Iris went completely still. "You called Rebecca?" "Yeah. Funny thing, she doesn't remember buying you any jewelry." Iris set down her fork and gave me the look she reserved for particularly slow clients. "Kellan, my sister has 3 young children and works retail. Do you really think she wants to advertise spending money on gifts when she's barely making ends meet? She probably told everyone it was from the clearance rack." It was smooth, I had to give her that. Plausible enough to plant doubt, reasonable enough to make me feel petty for questioning it. Classic lawyer maneuvering. "What about Ethan Turner's post?" I pressed. "What about it?" "He has the exact same necklace." Iris laughed, but it sounded forced. "Kellan, honey, they mass-produce jewelry. Thousands of identical pieces get made and sold all over the country. The Instagram algorithm probably showed you that post because you'd been looking at pictures of necklaces. It's not some grand conspiracy." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her skin was soft, manicured. When had she started getting manicures? "I know you've been stressed about the shop," she continued, her voice gentle and patronizing. "But you're seeing patterns that aren't there. It's just a coincidence." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to accept that simple explanation and go back to my comfortable ignorance. But 20 years of troubleshooting had taught me that when multiple systems fail at once, there's usually a common cause. "You're probably right," I said, pulling my hand away. "Just seemed odd." "Of course I'm right." Iris smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Now, can we please drop this? I have a deposition to prepare for tonight." She disappeared into her home office after dinner, closing the door with a soft click. Through the thin walls, I could hear the faint sound of her typing, punctuated by occasional phone calls. Work calls, she'd always said. Important cases that required evening consultations. I'd never questioned it before. Chloe emerged from her room around 9, earbuds dangling around her neck like electronic jewelry. At 17, she'd inherited her mother's sharp features and natural confidence, along with a teenager's absolute certainty about everything. "Dad, you're being weird about Mom's necklace," she said, raiding the refrigerator for leftover pizza. "You heard that?" "The walls are thin, and you weren't exactly whispering." She bit into a cold slice, talking around the food. "Mom's right, you know. You're being paranoid." "Since when do you pay attention to your mother's jewelry?" Chloe rolled her eyes. "Since she started posting pictures of it on her Instagram. She's been getting really into fashion lately. Haven't you noticed?" I hadn't. When had I stopped noticing things about my wife? When had the woman I married become a stranger who posted fashion photos and received expensive gifts from mysterious sources? "Can I see her Instagram?" I asked. "Seriously? You're going to stalk Mom's social media now?" "I just want to understand." "Understand what? That your wife is allowed to have nice things? That she's allowed to have friends and interests outside of this house?" Chloe's voice rose, taking on the righteous indignation that teenagers wielded like weapons. "You're being controlling and jealous, and it's embarrassing." She stormed back to her room, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the lingering smell of reheated pizza and the growing certainty that I was losing my family to something I couldn't name or fight. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, navigating to Ethan Turner's profile. The necklace post was still there, but now I noticed other details. The timestamp showed it had been posted at 11:47 a.m., less than an hour after Iris had left for work. The background showed his lakeside house, the one he'd bought after his divorce 2 years ago. I scrolled through his other posts: gym selfies, real estate promotions, pictures of expensive meals at restaurants I couldn't afford, and scattered throughout, subtle hints of a relationship he wasn't quite ready to make public. A second wine glass on a restaurant table, 2 coffee cups on his kitchen counter, a woman's silhouette reflected in his bathroom mirror. The reflection was too blurry to identify, but the timing aligned perfectly with Iris's late nights and mysterious phone calls. I was still scrolling when Iris emerged from her office, looking tired but satisfied. "Productive evening?" I asked. "Very. This case is going to set a real precedent." She kissed the top of my head absently, her attention already shifting to whatever came next. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed. I'll be up in a minute." But I didn't go to bed. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at my phone screen and trying to piece together a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The necklace was just the beginning, I realized. The question wasn't whether my wife was having an affair, it was how long it had been going on, and how much of our marriage had become a performance for my benefit. I started paying attention to details I'd ignored for months. The way Iris's phone was always face down on the table, how she'd started working late 3 nights a week, always on cases that required client confidentiality, the new clothes that appeared in her closet, expensive pieces that didn't match her usual conservative style. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. Like a car that runs rough, you might not know exactly which part is failing, but you know something's wrong. On Thursday morning, I followed her to work, not stalking, just taking the same route to drop off parts at the auto supply store downtown. Iris parked in her usual spot behind the law office, but instead of going inside, she walked 3 blocks to the Coffee Corner Cafe. Ethan Turner was waiting for her at a corner table. I parked across the street and watched through the cafe's large windows. They sat close together, Iris leaning forward as Ethan spoke, her hand resting on his arm. Casual touches that spoke of intimacy, familiarity, the kind of unconscious physical connection that develops over time. They were together for 20 minutes. When they parted, Ethan kissed her cheek, brief but tender. Iris touched her face where his lips had been, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. I drove to my shop in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The morning passed in a blur of routine maintenance and oil changes, my body going through the motions while my mind processed what I'd witnessed. Around lunch, I called Mac McIntyre. Mac owned the Rusty Anchor, the bar where I'd been drowning my sorrows since high school. He was also an ex-cop who'd retired early after taking a bullet in the shoulder during a domestic dispute. If anyone could help me think through this situation rationally, it was Mac. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Mac said when I walked into the empty bar. "What's eating you?" I told him everything. The necklace, the Instagram post, the lies about Rebecca, the coffee meeting I'd witnessed that morning. Mac listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making non-committal sounds. "So what do you want to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know. Confront her? Hire a private investigator? Pretend I never saw anything? Those are all options." Mac polished a glass with practiced efficiency. "But first, you need to decide what outcome you're hoping for. You want to save your marriage, end it, get revenge? Because each of those paths requires different strategies." I stared into my beer, watching the bubbles rise to the surface. "I want the truth." "Truth's a luxury, my friend. Most people can't handle it when they get it." Mac set down the glass and leaned against the bar. "But if that's what you're after, You need evidence. Real evidence, not just suspicions and coincidences. How do I get that without becoming the kind of person who spies on his wife? Newsflash, Kellan. You're already spying on your wife. Question is whether you're going to do it smart or just stumble around hoping to catch them in the act. Mac was right. I'd already crossed the line from trusting husband to suspicious investigator. The only question now was how far I was willing to go. That evening I suggested to Iris that we go out for dinner. Like a real date, I said. It's been too long. She hesitated, glancing at her phone. I have a lot of work to catch up on. One dinner. Come on, when's the last time we went somewhere nice? Fine. She smiled, but it looked painted on. Where did you have in mind? That new place by the lake. Waterfront Grill. I watched her face carefully. The restaurant was less than half a mile from Ethan's house, and I was curious to see her reaction. She didn't flinch, but I caught a flicker of something. Anxiety? Excitement? Sounds lovely, she said. We drove to the restaurant in relative silence, Iris checking her phone periodically and responding to what she claimed were work emails. The Waterfront Grill was busy for a Thursday night, filled with couples and families enjoying the view of the lake through floor-to-ceiling windows. Our table overlooked the water, with a perfect view of the expensive houses dotting the shoreline. I could see Ethan's place in the distance, lights glowing warmly in the gathering dusk. Beautiful view, I commented. Iris followed my gaze, her expression carefully neutral. Yes, it is. Ever wonder what it would be like to live in one of those lakefront houses? Sometimes. She sipped her wine, avoiding eye contact. But they're probably more trouble than they're worth. All that maintenance, the property taxes. Ethan Turner has one of those places, doesn't he? The real estate guy? Now she looked at me directly, her lawyer instincts kicking in. I wouldn't know. Why? Just curious. He seems to do well for himself. I suppose. Iris returned her attention to the menu. What looks good to you? The rest of dinner passed with stilted conversation and long silences. Iris kept checking her phone, claiming it was work, but typing responses too quickly for emails. Text messages, I realized. She was texting someone throughout our date. On the drive home, she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why are you suddenly so interested in Ethan Turner? No particular reason. His name keeps coming up, that's all. Coming up where? I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the road. Around town, people talk. What kind of talk? Nothing specific. Just that he's been more social lately. Showing up at events, making connections. Iris was quiet for several blocks. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully measured. Kellan, if you have something to say, just say it. This was my chance. I could lay out everything I'd observed, demand explanations, force a confrontation that would either clear the air or end our marriage. Instead, I chose a different path. I don't have anything to say, just making conversation. She relaxed slightly, but I could see her reflection in the passenger window, and she looked troubled. Good. Let her wonder what I knew and how much I'd figured out. When we got home, Iris disappeared into her office again, claiming she needed to finish a brief that was due in the morning. I went to bed alone, listening to the faint sound of her voice through the walls as she made what she claimed was a work call. But work calls don't usually involve whispered conversations and soft laughter. Friday morning brought rain and the kind of gray sky that matched my mood. Iris left early for a client meeting, kissing my forehead with the same mechanical affection she'd shown for weeks. I waited 30 minutes, then drove to the law office. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. I called the office from my truck, disguising my voice slightly and claiming to be a potential client who needed to speak with Iris Brooks urgently. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Brooks won't be in until this afternoon, the receptionist said. She's in depositions all morning. Can I take a message? Depositions. That was a new lie. I drove to Ethan's lakefront house, parking on a side road with a clear view of his driveway. Iris's silver sedan was parked next to his Tesla, both cars glistening with raindrops. They were inside together while she was supposed to be working. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching the house and wrestling with emotions I couldn't name. Anger, certainly. Betrayal. But also a strange sense of relief that my suspicions were finally confirmed. The not knowing had been worse than the truth. Around 11, Iris emerged from the house. She was wearing the sapphire necklace and a dress I'd never seen before. Something red and form-fitting that transformed her from small-town lawyer to someone I barely recognized. Ethan followed her onto the porch, pulling her close for a kiss that lasted longer than appropriate for friends. I took pictures with my phone, the camera clicking softly as I documented the end of my marriage. They separated reluctantly, Iris touching the necklace as she walked to her car. A nervous gesture, or maybe just habit. Ethan watched her drive away, then went back inside his house. I followed Iris back to town, staying far enough behind to avoid detection. She parked at the office and hurried inside, probably to establish an alibi for the morning she'd supposedly spent in depositions. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. I went through the motions at the shop, changing oil and rotating tires while my mind processed what I'd witnessed. Customers came and went, their problems simple and solvable. A squeaky brake here, a low battery there. If only marriage came with diagnostic codes and repair manuals. That evening, Iris was unusually affectionate. She cooked my favorite meal, asked detailed questions about my day, and even suggested we watch a movie together. Guilt behavior, Mac would have called it. The cheater's instinct to overcompensate. "You seem different today," I said as we settled onto the couch. "Different how?" "Happier. More energetic." She curled up against my side, something she hadn't done in months. "Maybe I'm just feeling good about things. Work's going well, Chloe's doing better in school, and we had a nice dinner last night." "The depositions went well this morning?" A slight pause. "Very well. We made real progress." I wrapped my arm around her, feeling like a fraud. "I'm glad." We watched some romantic comedy she'd chosen, Iris laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny. She was performing happiness, I realized, playing the role of the content wife while planning her next rendezvous with her lover. When the movie ended, she suggested we go to bed early. "It's been such a long week," she said, stretching like a cat. "I could use some rest." But she didn't rest. After I pretended to fall asleep, I heard her get up and pad quietly to the bathroom. The shower ran for 20 minutes, longer than her usual routine. When she came back to bed, she smelled like expensive soap and the perfume she only wore for special occasions. She was preparing for someone, just not me. I lay awake until 3 a.m., listening to her breathe and planning my next move. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Photos of them together, lies about her whereabouts, the mysterious necklace that connected her to Ethan's Instagram posts. But Mac was right. I needed more than suspicions and blurry pictures. I needed proof that would hold up in divorce court, evidence that would protect my interests when this marriage inevitably collapsed. Saturday morning, I told Iris I was going fishing with Mac. Another lie to add to our collection. "Have fun," she said, barely looking up from her laptop. "I'll probably spend the day catching up on paperwork." Instead of fishing, Mac and I drove to his brother's electronics store in Portland. Tommy McIntyre was a former Marine who'd found his calling in surveillance equipment after leaving the service. His shop catered to private investigators, security companies, and suspicious spouses. "GPS tracker's your best bet," Tommy explained, showing us a device the size of a matchbox. "Magnetic mount, 2-week battery life, real-time location updates through an app on your phone." "Is this legal?" I asked. Tommy shrugged. "Depends on the state and the circumstances. In Maine, you can track a vehicle you own or co-own. Just don't use the information to harass or threaten anyone." I bought the tracker and a small digital recorder, spending money I couldn't really afford on equipment I'd never imagined needing. The tools of a marriage detective, Mac called them. That afternoon, while Iris was supposedly working in her office, I attached the GPS tracker to the underside of her car. It took less than 30 seconds, the magnetic mount clicking into place behind the rear wheel well. Now I would know exactly where she went and when. The waiting was the hardest part. I spent Sunday in a state of nervous anticipation, checking the tracking app every few minutes like a teenager waiting for a text from his crush. Iris stayed home most of the day, working in her office or reading in the living room. Normal wife behavior. But Monday morning, everything changed. The GPS tracker revealed patterns I'd been too naive to notice. While I thought Iris was working late at the office, she was actually spending 2 to 3 hours every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at Ethan's lakefront house. The timeline was precise, predictable. She'd leave the office at 5:30, drive to his place, and stay until 8 or 9 before coming home with stories about difficult clients and complex cases. Tuesday afternoon, I decided to gather audio evidence. I hid the digital recorder in her car, tucked under the passenger seat where it wouldn't be easily discovered. If she was making personal calls during her commute to and from Ethan's house, I wanted to hear them. Wednesday evening, I retrieved the device while Iris was in the shower. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop and opened the audio files. The first few recordings were mundane: radio music, phone calls with actual clients, her voice talking to herself about grocery lists and scheduling conflicts. But the final recording, made during her drive home from Ethan's house, was different. "I know it's complicated," Iris was saying, her voice soft and intimate. "But Kellan's been so distant lately. I don't think he even notices when I'm gone." A male voice responded, tinny through the car's Bluetooth system. "Maybe it's time to tell him the truth." "Not yet. I need to be strategic about this. If I file for divorce now, he'll get half of everything, including the practice. But if I can prove he's been neglectful or emotionally absent..." "You're overthinking this, babe. Just leave him." "It's not that simple, Ethan. I've worked too hard to build my career to let some small-town mechanic take half of it in a divorce settlement." The conversation continued for several more minutes, covering logistics for their next meeting and complaints about my various shortcomings as a husband. But it was that phrase, "some small-town mechanic," that hit hardest. 15 years of marriage reduced to a dismissive job description. I listened to the recording 3 times, taking notes and timestamps. Then I copied the file to a secure folder and started planning my response. Thursday morning, I confronted Iris about the necklace again, this time with a different approach. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her over breakfast, "about the jewelry being mass-produced." She looked up from her phone, wary. "What about it?" "I did some research online. That particular necklace design is actually quite rare, only sold at high-end boutiques, custom-made to order." It was a complete lie, but delivered with enough confidence to plant doubt. "I'm sure you're mistaken," Iris said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe. But I was thinking of getting you the matching earrings for our anniversary. Do you remember which store Rebecca bought it from?" The trap was simple but effective. If the necklace really came from her sister, she should be able to provide details about the purchase. If it came from Ethan, she'd have to either admit the truth or invent more lies. I'd have to ask her," Iris stammered. "She mentioned it was on sale, but I don't remember the specific store." "No problem. I'll call her myself." "No!" The response was too quick, too sharp. "I mean, don't bother Rebecca with that. She's dealing with so much right now." "It's just a quick question. Kellan, please, just drop it." But I couldn't drop it. Not anymore. The lies were unraveling, and Iris knew it. She spent the rest of breakfast in tense silence, checking her phone obsessively and avoiding eye contact. That evening, I suggested we invite Ethan Turner to dinner. Why would we do that? Iris asked, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. He seems like a nice guy. Successful, social. Maybe we should get to know him better. I don't think that's necessary. Come on, it could be fun. When's the last time we entertained? Iris set down her fork and studied my face, looking for tells. What's this really about? Nothing. I just thought it might be nice to expand our social circle. Ethan and I barely know each other. Another lie, casual and automatic. I wondered how many others I'd missed over the months. Really? I thought you'd worked with him on some real estate deals. A few transactions, nothing major. I returned to my dinner, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Well, maybe some other time. Friday morning, I called in sick to work and followed Iris's car using the GPS tracker. She went to the office as usual, stayed for 2 hours, then drove to a jewelry store in downtown Portland. I watched from across the street as she entered the shop with a small box, the same size as a necklace case. She was inside for 15 minutes, emerging empty-handed and looking frustrated. I waited until she drove away, then entered the store myself. "Excuse me," I said to the clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional smile. "My wife was just in here with a sapphire necklace. I'm wondering if you were able to help her with the return?" The clerk's expression shifted to confusion. "I'm sorry, but we can't accept returns on items that weren't purchased here. I tried to explain that to your wife, but she seemed quite upset." "Not purchased here?" "No, sir. That particular piece came from Turner Jewelers on Oak Street. I recognized the setting immediately. They do beautiful custom work." Turner Jewelers, the same last name as Ethan. "Is Turner Jewelers related to Ethan Turner, the real estate agent?" I asked. "Oh yes, that's his family's business. His brother Marcus runs it now, but Ethan still has an account there. Buys a lot of gifts for his lady friends." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Ethan had bought the necklace from his family's jewelry store, probably at a significant discount. Iris had tried to return it, either to cover her tracks or because she'd had second thoughts about the affair. When that failed, she'd been stuck with evidence of their relationship that she couldn't easily explain. I thanked the clerk and walked back to my truck in a daze. The circumstantial evidence had become a clear pattern of deception and betrayal. But more than that, I now understood that this wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to end our marriage on terms favorable to Iris. She wanted out, but she wanted to keep everything we'd built together. That evening, I made my decision. If Iris wanted to play games, I'd show her what a small-town mechanic could do when he put his mind to it. Saturday morning, I asked Iris to meet me at the Coffee Corner Cafe, the same place where I'd watched her with Ethan just days earlier. "This is unusual," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. She was wearing the sapphire necklace again, a deliberate choice that felt like a challenge. "I wanted to talk somewhere neutral," I said, pulling out my phone and setting it on the table between us. "About us. About our marriage." "What about it?" "I know about Ethan." The words hung in the air like smoke. Iris went very still, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. For a moment, I saw genuine fear in her eyes, not of me, but of losing control of the narrative she'd been crafting. "I don't know what you think you know. I know about the necklace. I know about the meetings at his house 3 times a week. I know about your plan to divorce me and keep the law practice." Iris set down her cup with deliberate care. "You've been spying on me." "I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to me for months." "I haven't been lying." I played the audio recording from her car, her own voice filling the small cafe as she discussed strategy for leaving some small-town mechanic while protecting her financial interests. Other customers glanced over, curious about the domestic drama unfolding in their morning routine. Iris's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You recorded me without consent. That's illegal." "Actually, it's not. Maine is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm legally entitled to overhear. She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. When did you become so calculating? When I realized my wife was planning to destroy our marriage for money. It's not about money, Kellan. It's about respect, about building something meaningful instead of just existing. With Ethan Turner? Ethan sees my potential. He understands ambition. He understands that you're married to someone who owns half of everything you've worked for. Iris leaned back in the booth, her lawyer instincts finally kicking in. What do you want? The truth. All of it. How long has this been going on? She was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. 6 months, maybe 7. Since before you started working late? The late nights were real work initially, but Ethan and I started talking at town events, and he was interested in me. In my opinions, my goals. When's the last time you asked about my dreams, Kellan? When's the last time you told me you had any? Exactly. She straightened the necklace, a nervous gesture. We grew apart. These things happen. These things don't just happen. People make choices. Fine. I made choices. I chose someone who sees me as more than a small-town lawyer married to a mechanic. There it was, the core of her resentment. I wasn't successful enough, ambitious enough, sophisticated enough for the woman she'd decided to become. So why not just ask for a divorce? Why the elaborate deception? Iris smiled, but it was cold and calculating. Because I earned that law practice. I built it from nothing while you were content to coast on your father's business. I'm not giving up half of everything I worked for just because you can't handle the truth about our marriage. What truth is that? That we settled for each other. That we've been going through the motions for years, pretending to be happy while we both died a little more each day. The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to hurt. We had been going through the motions, living parallel lives in the same house without really connecting. But I'd thought that was normal, the natural evolution of a long marriage. I hadn't realized Iris saw it as a prison. So what happens now? I asked. Now you decide whether you want to make this easy or difficult. Meaning you can agree to an uncontested divorce with reasonable terms, or I can make your life very complicated. I know things about your business, Kellan. Tax issues, safety violations, customer complaints. I can make problems for you that you can't afford to fight. The threat was delivered with professional calm, but I heard the steel underneath. This was the woman who'd shared my bed for 15 years, threatening to destroy me if I didn't cooperate with her plans. And if I agree to your terms? Clean break. You keep the shop and the house, I keep the practice. Chloe can choose where she wants to live. What about Ethan? Does he factor into your future plans? Iris touched the necklace again. That's not your concern anymore. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording I'd been making throughout our conversation. Actually, it is, because now I have everything I need. What do you mean? I mean you just confessed to adultery, threatened to file false reports against my business, and admitted to planning a fraudulent divorce. All recorded, all admissible in court. For the first time since I'd known her, Iris looked genuinely frightened. You can't use that. Watch me. I stood up, leaving money on the table for my untouched coffee. You want a divorce? Fine. But we're going to do this the honest way, with full disclosure and fair division of assets. And Iris? She looked up at me, her composure finally cracking. Next time you want to leave someone, try having the courage to say so instead of sneaking around like a teenager. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting alone with her expensive necklace and her shattered plans. Through the window, I saw her pull out her phone, probably calling Ethan to report that their careful strategy had collapsed. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like the end of everything I'd thought I wanted. But sometimes, endings are the only honest thing left.